Hey guys, I hope y'all are doing well. For once, I think I'm actually going to make two videos that are pretty close together. So today we're going to go over something that came to me just a little bit ago. I was actually just relaxing and trying to take a nap, and this stuff kind of popped into my mind, and I had to write it down and talk about it. I hope that it's helped us to be more aware of the things we see going on around us today in the current state of things, especially politically. So we're going to start in John 16, 1 through 4. Jesus said, "These things have I spoken unto you, that ye should not be offended. They shall put you out of the synagogue. Yea, the time cometh that whosoever killeth you will think that he doeth God service. And these things will they do unto you, because they have not known the Father nor me. And these things have I told you, that when the time shall come, ye may remember that I told you of them. And these things I have not said unto you at the beginning, because I was with you." So, Jesus gives this extremely important information to the disciples about what is going to take place. Now, this all took place during their time in the 1st century AD. But it's also something that we can see throughout history for those that are true followers of Christ. And we're seeing these things take place today. Or at least it appears that we're seeing the things line up into that. They're starting to turn in towards that end result. So some of these things I want to focus on here is, number one, why do they kick people out of the synagogues? Why did they kick the Christians out of the synagogue to begin with? What was the purpose of that? If Christians just come to the synagogue, sit there quietly, listen to the message and leave, why kick them out? You would think you would want them in there, just so they can hear your message and you could try to reconvert them, away from the truth back to regular Judaism. But that's not what the deal is here. They're kicking them out. Why? And then also, those who kick you out will think they are doing something good in the end. They're doing a great service to the society or the community. So remember these things as we go forward and think about them regarding today. So we're going to go to Acts 13, 14 through 16 and see an example here of what's going on. "But when they had departed," this is Paul, "and from Perga they came to Antioch in Pisidia, and went into the synagogue of the Sabbath day and sat down." Paul always did this. He would go into the synagogues to every town he went in first, to the Jews first, and also unto the Greeks, but he'd always go into the synagogues first. Why? "And after the reading of the law and the prophets, the rulers of the synagogue sent unto them, saying, Ye men and brethren, if ye have any word of exhortation for the people, say on. And Paul stood up, and beckoning with his hand, said, Men of Israel, and ye that fear God, give audience." And he gives his speech. So in the synagogue, there is actually a time during the service where anybody in the synagogue can stand up and give a word of exhortation and speak unto the people directly. They have a free platform to speak. So Paul uses this to their advantage. He goes into the synagogue, and when that moment comes for him to be able to stand up and to witness and give the gospel and the witness of Jesus Christ to them, he stands up and does it. He uses that free speech moment to his advantage for the furtherance of the gospel, to bring Christ to more people. And so there was this concept of, honestly, this moment in the synagogue service where free speech was given to anybody. And so they had to kick the Christians out because they could not allow them to have this platform, because they were converting people. People were hearing the message and saying, hey, this makes sense. When you look at the whole of Scripture and you start looking at Jesus, suddenly this is all making sense. And so the elites are standing there saying, we got to get rid of these people. We can't allow them in here to keep spewing this stuff. And we'll see one of the big reasons why when we get to the end of this video. Now today, how could this relate to us today? What would be an example? YouTube, Facebook, social media, Twitter, all these other things where people are given a moment where they can stand up and speak the truth, speak the gospel, speak good values unto the society. and to lead them onto the right path, to lead them out of darkness. The elites are saying, whoa, we got to kick you out of this. You're banned. You can't say true things here because it offends. Who does it really offend? It offends them and their power. They use the excuse that you offend other people, but it's always them and their power that you offend when you speak the truth, because that's the way it is with tyrants. But so you see that the same thing that was occurring then is somewhat going on today, just in a different form, but it's the same exact method that they were using back then, just in a different form. So now let's go to Acts 19, 24 through 32. This wind is dang cold today. Okay. For a certain man named Demetrius, a silversmith, which had made silver shrines to Diana, brought no small gain unto the craftsman. So who is he? He's an idol maker, whom he called together in the workmen of like occupation, and said, Sirs, ye know that by this craft we have our wealth. So here we have the big businessmen. Now what are they making? Idols. What is important about this? Because during this time, church and state were together. There was no separation. So the businesses were using religion, which was propped up by the state, to give them, say, we are your masters because the great god Demetrius or whatever else god put me in charge. Or if you're in Rome, Augustus himself is a god. You know, and so you see the concept of church and state being intertwined, and you see the big business owners that are in league with the state. Okay, now let's continue. Moreover, ye see and hear, not alone in Ephesus, but also throughout all Asia, this Paul hath persuaded and turned away much people, saying they be no gods, which are made with hands. So that not only is our craft is in danger to be set at naught, but also the temple of the great goddess Diana should be despised, and her magnificence should be destroyed, and all Asia and the world worshipeth. And when they heard these sayings, they were full of wrath and greed, and cried out, saying, Great is Diana the Ephesians. And the whole city was filled with confusion, having caught Gaius and Aristarchus, men of Macedonia, Paul's companions in travel, and they rushed with one accord into the theater. And when Paul had entered in unto the people, the disciples suffered him not. And they wouldn't let him go and talk to these people because it was a mob. And I think they made the right decision, because have you seen the videos of people trying to talk to mobs? It don't really work. And a certain of the chief of Asia, which were his friends, sent unto him, desiring him that he would not peradventure himself into the theater. Some therefore cried one thing, and some another, for the assembly was confused, and more part knew not wherefore they were come together. So we see this instance of big business and big government intertwined. Why? Because it is mutually beneficial to one another, to be in league together, to prop up each other. Okay? Big businesses, just like we see today. Why do we see big businesses propagating these socialist nonsense? These things that honestly sound like they would be the very opposite of what they should stand for. Especially when you see these businesses sucking up to China and every other country. Money and power, because they're in league together. But we also see it because big businesses love big regulations. They love big taxes. Why? And they love government handouts to businesses that comply with these measures. Why? Because it cuts out their competition. The little man cannot afford all these huge regulations and little taxes. So what does he do? He goes out of business. But the big guy, he can. And so there goes the little guy. And who's left? Big guy, who is in league with the government, both helping and patting one another's hands. And so we see this in Acts, where the idol makers are in league with the state because they're making idols, and the idols are there to prop up the whole point of the state existing. So they're able to influence the public and the mob of ignorant people to ban and destroy people without the people even knowing the real reason, which is money and power. The truth always threatens falsity. It always threatens those that are wicked and thieves, always. And so you see the reason that they had to destroy them. try to call them out and wipe them out. So now let's go to Revelation 13, 16 through 7 and see another example of how this is done. 16 and 17. And he, this is probably the Antichrist, causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive the mark of the beast, in their right hand or on their foreheads. This is a mark of compliance. I agree and bow down and follow you, is what that is. That is subservience. And that no man might buy or sell, save he that had the mark of the name of the beast, or the number of his name. So you threaten the livelihoods of the people to force them into line. You either drop to your knees, bow before me, or you will not be able to feed yourself or your family. And everything you have will be taken away and stripped from you. You will lose everything if you follow this Jesus character, if you follow the truth. Now, how does this come in line today? What's happening in Canada? What are they doing to the truckers? They're literally freezing the bank accounts, stealing their money and their livelihoods, their licenses, and everything that they've worked for their entire life, because they cannot allow these people to threaten their power. If this is allowed, they can have total control over the populace by fear of the populace losing everything. If we allow them, the government, to take away your livelihood, your money and income, they can take away everything you have. Now, some of you may say, well, that's just in Canada. I mean, they're crazy up there. Anyway, it's just in Canada. In America, there's a thing called the ESG scores, which is a offshoot of the social credit system that we see in China. And yes, China is basically a role model for all these Western governments today. So ESG scores are in near about every state. Now, you haven't heard much about it yet, but you will in the future. It's basically a score to determine how economically or environmentally friendly your business is, or you as an individual are. Do you ascribe to our view of how somebody should live their lives, or our views on certain aspects or political agendas, or not? If not, then no food for you. You get higher taxes. You don't get you don't get to buy here. That's the same stuff that we see going on. The same stuff we see going on today is talked about in this scripture. And we're seeing these things happen. Now, I hope to God that this isn't right around the corner, Revelation 13 for us, but there's some iffy stuff that seems pretty dang similar. And if nothing else, history rhymes. And we saw a lot of this stuff happen to the first disciples and throughout church history. So now let's go to one more place. Acts 17, 1 through 7. Now here's the real reason why all these things are happening. Kicking people out of the synagogue, not allowing them to speak, banning them, not allowing them to sell and buy their goods, or attacking them with businesses in the arm of the government. Here's why. Now, when they had passed through Amphipolis and Apollonia, they came to Thessalonica, and where there was a synagogue of the Jews. And of course, what does Paul do? He enters into the synagogue, went in unto them, and 3 Sabbath days reasoned with them out of the Scriptures, opening and alleging that Christ must needs have suffered and risen again from the dead, and that this Jesus whom I preach unto you is Christ. And some of them believed and consorted with Paul and Silas, and of the devout Greeks a whole great multitude of the chief women, not a few. But the Jews which believed not, moved with envy, because they were saying, there's a new king in town. His name is Jesus. And it's not you, Rabbi, and it's not you, Caesar. It's Jesus. But the Jews which believed not, moved with envy, took unto them certain lewd individuals of a baser sort, and gathered a company, and set all the city in an uproar, and assaulted the house of Jason, and sought to bring him out to the people. So what do? Of course, they rile up a mob of people who don't even know what's really going on, because you let the mob think for you. Never let the mob think for you. Be an individual. Make wise decisions by your own mind and not somebody else or what society tells you. And when they had found them not, they drew Jason and certain brethren unto the rulers of the city, crying, These have turned the world upside down, and are come hither also. So, and whom Jason hath received, these all do contrary to the decrees of who? To Caesar, to the government, to the God that we're supposed to call a God. The person we're supposed to call a God is Caesar. Saying there is another king, one Jesus. So what is the whole reason this threatens them? Because it upsets the world order. It turns the world order upside down. So remember what Jesus said, we talked about this in the last video. Those that humble themselves are exalted. Those that exalt themselves are abased. The first shall be the last. This upsets the whole established everything. Knowing that Jesus is the true God. Not Caesar, not government, not the big businesses, none of this. Jesus, and that it sets the order that all these elites build their whole wealth and power upon. It threatens them because the truth always threatens wickedness to destroy it. Because in the end, ultimately, good will triumph over all these evil things we see taking place. So these were just some things that I saw, these parallels in Scripture. And some of you be saying, oh man, Kyle must be thinking it's the end times. Could be. I mean, I don't know. Nobody knows the time and day. But there is some dang striking parallels that we see in the play today. And if we don't stand together and stand against it, and willing to suffer for it, like the truckers are doing in Canada, I don't know if we are going to stop it unless we stand against it fully and heartily together. And we have to stand together as a church body for the gospel, for Christ, and not standing in fear of what the world can do, but fearing what God can do. So I hope this was edifying. It was interesting. At least makes us think about some of the things we see today, and maybe y'all see a lot more parallels than I'm seeing. But I wish y'all the very best. Howdy guys, sorry. There was one other thing I wanted to add to the last video because I forgot to mention this. So, all those things that we went over, the disciples pretty much went through most of those in their lifetimes, and the early Christians. And guess what? They won. The whole Roman Empire that ended up persecuting them, the Jewish elites, all of that, they ended up losing. And the Christians won. They went and conquered the entire empire, spread throughout the world. We need to be thinking how they did that. I would love to read more on a study of the early Christian church and find these things. But it's definitely through the scriptures that they were able to prevail through their faith and stuff. So that's just something I wanted to add, that this isn't just a political battle or anything like that, or something that's destined to happen, because they went through it. They went through all those things, and they somehow, by the grace of God, came out shining at the end. So we can as well. So God bless.